Good evening all, and thank you for joining us for the Lamorinda CERT monthly meeting for January 2021. We're going to have three speakers tonight. We're going to start out with Jeff Isaacs, Fire Marshal of Moraga Orinda Fire District, and then we'll hear from Chief David Winnacker, again of Moraga Orinda Fire District. And then we'll finish up with Dennis Rein, the community emergency, forgotten his exact title, at again at Moraga Orinda Fire District. So please enjoy the speech or the presentation from Fire Marshal Isaacs.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is Jeff Isaacs, Fire Marshal for the Moraga Orinda Fire District. I'm going to turn it over real quick to Chief Winnacker for some opening comments, and then a little change in the order this evening. I will let Chief go first with his opening comments and then his PowerPoint presentation. Then I will take over. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, members of the community, for joining us tonight. First, just a brief public service announcement. On the screen before you see three dates, January 21st for Orinda, January 28th for Canyon and Bollinger, and February 4th for Moraga. These are the community meeting dates where we're going to explain and review the draft Community Wildfire Protection Plan that MOFD, in collaboration with our stakeholders, and stakeholders include the city, the town, the county, and of course the residents. We're going to go through the elements of the CWPP and how we believe it will serve as an important tool to prioritize our community-wide efforts towards reducing the threat of uncontrolled wildfire. The draft document is up on our website. There's also a digital form and an email address that members of the public can use to comment on it. It's really important that folks who are interested in this topic take the time to engage. We believe that if done correctly, the CWPP will serve as an organizing document for the next 3 years to ensure that our efforts are coordinated, they're part of a larger plan, and they're undertaken within a strategic framework. And within the world of wildfire protection, CWPPs happen to be that framework. They also are an element that is required to access certain federal grants. And so by completing this, not only will we have an actionable document, which we believe will be very helpful in guiding our efforts over the coming years, but we will have unlocked yet another access to grant funding that we believe potentially will offer an accelerated path towards some of the large-scale projects we believe should be done around the perimeter of the community. So we'd encourage you, one, to take a look at the draft document that's up on our website. Two, provide comments and input if you happen to have them after having read the document. And three, really encourage you to attend one of these meetings. Certainly residents can attend any of them. However, the information presented that's specific to fire spread and fuel loads and so forth is going to be targeted to the community that's listed on each of those dates. And that's done understanding that this is all within a interconnected regional approach. However, there is an awful lot of information, particularly when we start getting down to fire line intensities and modeled spread rates and associated fuel loading. We wanted to try to be able to target some of that to the specific communities to allow a greater degree of granularity, better resolution, if you will, where we can really start getting into the pieces and parts of each specific area. So I'd really encourage you to participate in the process so that we can make this a meaningful document that has relevant stakeholder input from the beginning. And we're very proud of the work that's been done, but we recognize there's quite a bit more to be done. And we think this will help round out some of our efforts by giving them a little more organization. If you go to the next slide, please, Jeff.
Give me just a second, sir. I'm trying to make that happen.
The next piece, Dennis will talk more about this in detail later on. I just want to put in a quick plug, though, that as many of you are aware, we have evacuation zones in the Lamorinda area. So Lafayette, Moraga, and Orinda have these zones. They've been refined, and with help some of our technology partners, we have a new tool, and you can get to it at the website that's listed there, or by simply typing into your favorite search engine, My Zone or Know Your Zone, Zonehaven, and it'll pop right up. And next slide. And what that brings you to is a website where you can plug in either your address or, as you'll see here, back one, Jeff. You can either enter your address along the top there, and it'll zoom you right in, or as you can see there's a zoomable and scrollable map that allows you to zoom right in and identify your neighborhood and figure out what zone you're in. That's really important in the planning process as we potentially are working through a response to a wildfire. One of the great challenges we're going to have is information exchange. And I think we're all very aware and concerned about the challenges that the CWS, which is the Community Warning Systems, our program of record for evacuation notifications in Contra Costa County. I think everyone's concerned about how well that's going to work during a public safety power shutoff, as potentially things get overwhelmed, as information is delayed and so forth. So this is yet another place that residents not only can use to find out which zone they're in, but they can use to check on the status of the zone. Because while we will be pushing our out information primarily through the CWS, that's our primary means of sharing information, we'll also be updating this website, which gives residents an opportunity to check on the status of evacuations. We think this is an important piece of information for residents to be aware of, and we would encourage everyone to take the time to figure out what zone you're in, and then make sure you communicated and you shared that information with your neighbors. And Dennis will walk you through exactly how that works towards the end. The last thing I'd like to add as I turn over to Jeff to talk about the changes in the fire code. For many of you who've heard our conversations before, we've talked a number of areas about best practices. These are things you can do to reduce the likelihood of your home and the residents, that being you and your family, being negatively impacted by a wildfire. And we've talked about a lot of things as best practice, and this is a good idea, and this will help. Well, with the adoption of the fire code, which went into effect on October 7th of 2020, and the elements of the fire code as they pertain to exterior hazard abatement, or the reduction of combustible materials around homes and on parcels in the district, those are now a requirement. So not only are they a good idea, but they're required, and that enforcement will start on 1 June. And really the request here is that for those of you who are on this, participating in this event, who are on this call, who are participating in CERT, who are informed, aware, engaged, and involved in reducing our community's risk, once you know about what is required, and once you're aware of it, and you've given the tools, which Jeff will provide you tonight, to do an assessment of your property and figure out what work needs to be done, we really ask for your help in converting that knowledge into action and to taking the steps in a deliberate manner, because, like I said, we're not going to start enforcement until the annual hazard abatement deadline of June 1st. So there's some time to come up with a deliberate plan and to execute that, maybe take it one chunk at a time. But once you're aware of it and you have been given the tools and you're not armed with the information and the ability to do an assessment and then the time to coordinate and prepare to have work done, we'd ask that you do it. Because every parcel that we have to go out and inspect, and every time we have to write a citation, and we have to go through all the enforcement process, that takes resources away from all of the other things we're doing. And specifically in this case, the members of the district who are out doing inspections and enforcement and all the follow-up that it takes when people don't voluntarily make their parcel compliant, those are the same folks that are running our chipping program or running our outreach and education. So it's taking resources away from that thing, that event, that act, that is physically reducing the amount of combustible fuel in our district. That's being siphoned away in the competition for resources as we have to allocate more days to enforcement. So once you know what needs to be done, it's tremendously helpful if that converts to action. And if you take a hard look at your parcel and you understand what needs to be done and then you do it, tremendously helpful. We'll also talk about how that applies to dead trees. There are a large number of Monterey pines in the district that are dying. When a pine tree turns red or orange, they don't grow green again. They're dead and they need to be removed. Clearly, those are hard to miss. We'd ask everyone to do an assessment of their property. And if you have a pine tree that has gone from green to red in the last several months, that means that the tree is now dead and ought to be removed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk about the fire code, but I'd really appreciate everyone's help As you take this information in, give it some time to think about it, go out and look at your parcel and start putting together your plan for how you're going to bring your parcel into compliance prior to June 1st. It will save us an awful lot of time going around doing enforcement and follow-up, and free up those resources to do other more productive things. Jeff, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you to Duncan and the CERT for the invite this evening, and chance to talk about our fire code. Let me get to the slides here. So for existing parcels and structures, the update to our fire code that was passed last year and will be enforced this year, we moved our annual compliance date from 15 June to 31 May. And that's to bring us into alignment with our neighboring agencies and partners. We extended our abatement period from 10 to 15 days. So the way we're going to do this year is you're going to get a 30-day, when we come out, we perform an assessment of your house and your property, and we give you 30 days to comply. We come back out after that 30 days and we do a inspection now. If we still find violations or areas that need improvement, we will give you 15 additional days to comply with that. After that, then we start moving towards the lien process, but we're always here to work with the homeowners and the property owners. So if you need additional time, you need additional questions answered, we're always here to do that. We'd much rather do this in a joint matter with the property owners and our citizens. This is a collaborative effort. The last thing we want to do is head down that lien road and enforcement. So if you have questions or need help, please feel free to reach out to us. So one of the other big things that we did with this fire code was we banned the use of combustible ground cover to include mulch within 2 feet of the structure. This is a pretty significant one for a lot of citizens. There's a lot of folks that have mulch and combustible ground cover right next to their house. Removing that combustible ground cover, you're removing the wick a way for fire to travel on the ground into your home. So that 2 feet bare space with rocks, aggregate, or a succulent, green grass, something like that, will prevent the ground fire from moving. And also within that 2 feet space, we require at least a 1 foot air gap on vegetation that's within that 2 foot box. So if you have anything within that 2 feet, it needs to have a 1 foot air gap from the ground up to the lowest branches of whatever type of plant or vegetation you have there. We've increased the clearance of tree canopies from 5 feet to 6 feet. This helps with the removal of ladder fuels and keeping that ground component of fire out of the trees. We're requiring the removal of eucalyptus or Monterey pine within 6 feet of structures. Require compliance with the exterior fire hazard standards for real property transfers. So anybody that's selling their house or purchasing new property, we're requiring a certificate from the fire district saying the property is in compliance with the exterior hazard abatement ordinance. And this is keeping in line with state law that has come out requiring the same thing. And then require the removal of juniper and bamboo within 10 feet of a roadway by 2023. We have a couple years on that one, but we still want to get the information out because there's a lot of properties that have pretty significant amount of juniper that's going to be, it's going to be costly to remove. So we want to give people enough time to plan on that. So I want to talk a little bit about the home ignition zone and what is a home ignition zone. This is a concept, or the concept of the home ignition zone was developed by a retired U.S. Forest Service scientist, Jack, in the late 1990s. It followed some breakthrough experimental research into how homes ignite due to the effects of radiant heat, as well as the ember cast. The home ignition zone is divided into 3 areas. You can see on the screen here, we have the immediate zone, 0 to 5 feet, intermediate zone, 5 to 30 feet, and then the extended zone, which is 30 to 100 feet. Like to remind everybody, in Moraga and Orinda, we require any parcels that are under an acre in size are required for a complete abatement. So you would go out to that extended zone, the 30 to 100 feet for most of our parcels. So what is the immediate zone? It's the area around the house from the furthest attached exterior point of the home out to 5 feet. This is that area that our 2 foot combustible ground cover will start to cover. We didn't go 0 to 5 feet. The 0 to 5 feet is a requirement in state responsibility areas, and it's also recommended from NFPA and the National Firewise program. But we felt to start with, that 0 to 2 feet would be the best for our citizens. In our fire code, we require the roofs and gutters to be free of dead leaves and debris, pine needles to be removed from the roof as well. Replace or repair any loose or missing shingles or roof tiles to prevent ember penetration. That's not in the fire code. That's just a really good reminder for everybody. You can read through these bullet points, or you can find them on the NFPA Firewise site. We recommend, again, clearing the debris from the exterior attic vents and install the 1/8 inch metal mesh screening to reduce embers. That is a big recommendation for any of you that have heard our Firewise talks or our Firewise assessments. That is a great way to prevent those embers from entering into your house. So if we remove the combustible ground cover, we put the 1/8 inch metal mesh screening, you've done a great job of preventing fire and those firebrands or embers from entering into your attic or underneath your floor space and catching stuff on fire. The intermediate zone, this is from 5 to 30 feet around your house. And this is just a transition of your landscaping and the fuel modification that needs to be done in that area from 5 to 30 feet. Yeah, create fuel breaks with your driveways, walkways, paths, patios, and decks. Keep lawn and native grasses mowed to no greater than 3 inches. Remove the ladder fuels. That is fuel that will allow the ground component of fire to travel into the trees, which will then travel into your homes. So our fire code requires that you remove all the tree limbs up to 6 feet, creating that space and removing the ladder fuels. If you have shorter trees or trees that are just young and they're starting to grow, we obviously don't require the 6 foot. Do 1/3 of the overall tree height. That way you don't kill the tree. Trees and shrubs in this zone should be limited to small clusters of a few to break up the continuity of the fuel. And the extended zone is 30 to 100 feet. And if you have larger parcels, out to your parcel boundary. The goal here is to not eliminate fire, but to interrupt the fire's path and keep flames small and on the ground, removing the ladder fuels. We really don't want the fires to get up into the trees, which then transitions into your home. Here's some pictures of the compliance with the vegetation within the 2 feet of the structures. So there is a picture of our fire administration building with a combustible ground cover. So this is not compliant. There is a picture of what compliancy looks like. We've removed the combustible ground cover and put the rocks in there. The plants are spread out and would not allow fire to go from one plant to the next plant. Here's a home that has done it correctly. They have rocks within that 2 feet space. And then as you can see, the one bush or plant there is limbed up to creating that 1 foot air gap. Here's another example, the green grass, and then you can see the space right next to the structure, that 2 feet out. It has a green, moist, succulent type ground cover there. Just another example. And want to talk about roadways real quick. Our fire code requires 3 feet back and 10 or 15 foot any tree or bush that overhangs the road. This is to allow for a safe evacuation of the citizens, as well as the safe passage of emergency vehicles. So here's an example of an area that needs a lot of work. Annual weeds and grasses aren't cut, the trees and stuff aren't limbed up. Here's an area of what right looks like. You can see the low hanging branches are pruned up to 6 feet. You can see the ground cover's been cut down. There's no grass over 3 feet in height. Again, another example of stuff right next to the roadway and how it should look. Chief Winnacker talked earlier about dead trees. I just wanted to hit on that topic again. We've noticed a large number of trees, Monterey pines, dying in the fire district. I've reached out to CAL FIRE's unit forester, Ed Ori, and I know East Bay Mud has done the same. CAL FIRE has sent some of their forestry staff down to review the situation and take a look. Right now, preliminary thoughts are there's kind of 3 causes for our Monterey pines to be dying, coming out of prolonged drought, forest pest, and a lot of the trees are at the end of their lifespan. So the combination of those 3 things, we're going to see a large number of trees potentially die. And to use the language that the foresters told me, come springtime, we may have additional trees wake up dead. So what we're seeing right now could get a little worse, but it's a reminder to the citizens, the fire code does not allow dead or dying trees on the property. So you need to start planning to get those dead trees removed. Our recommendation is to contact an arborist or a registered professional forester, have them come out and look at your trees. If you have a stand of several trees and maybe 1 or 2 are dead and the rest look green and healthy, have those healthy trees looked at, make sure there's no forest pests or beetles that will kill those trees as well. Even though some trees look green and healthy, forester or an arborist may recommend their removal just due to the beetle population or the drought or other circumstances. So again, our recommendation for those dead trees is to bring out a arborist or registered professional forester. And that will conclude my presentation. Dennis, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I just want to echo what Jeff's saying about the situation with Monterey pines in the fire district and Lamorinda in general. We talked about it at the fire station one afternoon, and I just kind of went out and drove around, and it's pretty remarkable the number of trees that are dead and or dying. So, you know, with the audience that we have tonight of 76 people, if you go out tomorrow and drive around, just kind of look for those red, unsightly, dead or dying trees, and then, you know, we think that there'll be many more of those. So if you're going to have them removed, which you're going to have to, it's best to start looking at that now. So enough said about that. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'm going to share my screen now, I think. Hopefully this will work. You should all be seeing my screen that says Lamorinda Evacuation Planning and Situational Awareness for 2021. Somebody on the panel nod your head if that's coming through. Okay, good. Thank you very much. I always worry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you hopefully all know, and then talk a little bit about the Zonehaven application and some of the things that we've been working on here in the district and with the 3 Lamorinda communities. Let me see if I can get this video to play.
Mandatory fire evacuation order.
When seconds matter.
Fires that move incredibly fast, that actually force people to run from their homes, have become the new normal in California.
The wildfires of the last few years burned so fast and so hot, gathering around a paper map to discuss evacuation plans once a wildfire has already broken out wastes precious minutes. Wildfires like the campfire highlight the critical need for smart evacuation plans.
This isn't a fire that we can fight right here. This is what we fear in San Mateo County as a large, damaging, wind-driven fire.
It's time to bring emergency evacuations into the modern age. Introducing Zonehaven, a standardized emergency evacuation platform.
This is the first platform of its kind. It's the first to be deployed in the Bay Area.
Notifying first responders and San Mateo County residents the moment an evacuation is ordered.
And the moment it's called for, dispatch can see it, the public can see it, the first responders are all looking at the same map.
When every minute counts.
Firefighters want to know how fast and how far the fire is going to travel. Law enforcement wants to know which roads do I need to open up and create one-way or two-way traffic controls.
And San Mateo County residents want to know if they need to evacuate, which roads are safe, and where to go.
We've been able to harness the local knowledge in every individual jurisdiction and agency, put it on a platform that everybody's using the same language and technology, all with the goal of ensuring that people get out quickly, they get out safely, and they have the exact same information that first responders do in those critical moments.
So that was just a quick video. That was just right across the bay at San Mateo County. And during last summer's fire events, the Lightning Complex over there, they actually used the Zonehaven platform. I just want to talk a little bit about how that works. As you can see, and I'm pretty proud to say that Lamorinda was one of the first groups to develop our own sort of evacuation zone program and have a written evacuation plan based on those zones. And what it really does for us, as Chief Cox was saying in the video, is it puts all the information in one spot, and not only for first responders, but for residents. I'll show you how to figure out what zone you're in, although the zone number is not as important as just knowing that you're in a zone. But all these zones that you see on the screen right now, they all link not only fire agencies with the county sheriff's office that runs the community warning system, but with the law enforcement agencies. And it gives us what we call in emergency management a common operating picture. So for example, if one of the zones here, we'll just pick ORI 10, which is kind of this north Orinda, north of the freeway area. If you can see where my cursor is here, see if I can mark that. Kind of this area here. No, that's not going to do it. Oops. And the way it's set up now is what we're working on before fire season of 2021 gets here. Is actually the officer in the field, the sergeant or the chief of police for Orinda, who is in charge of the evacuation for any particular zone for that agency, law enforcement agency having jurisdiction, will be able to activate that from the field and send notices not only to CWS, but to other fire agencies, to other law enforcement agencies. And it will also send it out on a map like this that's available on a website to the public, which will trigger the community warning system notifications. Hopefully everybody here is signed up for CWS, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But then as time goes on, having been involved in a number of large scale evacuations, I always seriously tell people that the first thing or the second thing people want to know after they've been evacuated is, hey, when can I go home? And so having a program that will show the zone's status, whether it's shelter in place, pre-evacuation warning, mandatory evacuation order, okay to repopulate, okay for reentry, or anything else in between that's available to the public, hopefully will save us all a lot of anxiety and push information out when it needs to get out there. So that's kind of, this slide's kind of the overview of what our evacuation zones look like. And you'll also notice over here, we have them for Contra Costa County. That includes some of the East Bay Regional Park District property and East Bay Mud Watershed, and it even goes up into El Cerrito, Kensington. So the system is growing, and I think the more comprehensive it gets, the better it will be. So here's kind of how that works. The chief was talking about. I used Moraga zone E013, and so if you go to the website here, and Julie, if you could put some of these links into the chat so people can copy them down. This community.zonehaven.com. You'll actually bring up this screen, and you can put your address here. Here I put 1280 Moraga Way, and it highlighted this polygon, which 1280 Moraga Way is our fire station that's located right about here. And it gives what the zone number is. It gives what its status is, last updated time, and then gives you some other useful links. So if I clicked on this Get Alerts, it would take me to the community warning system just in case I hadn't registered yet. So that's this little button right here takes you to the zone status. And as I said before, it can show you whether that zone, its color would actually change to red if an evacuation order, or yellow for an evacuation warning. Some sort of advisory turns it blue. Green is clear to repopulate. This kind of purple color is shelter in place, and no color at all is normal. So there's a lot of information here, and in an actual evacuation emergency, this would be very helpful, not only for, like I said, our first responders, but for you as residents to know what was going on in your zone. Let's see if I can get, whoops. And so, you know, what are evacuation zones? This is kind of a big overlook. When we developed these with the company Zonehaven, we actually looked at traffic flows on the key arterial streets. So we developed those zones so that we wouldn't, well, that we could actually manage the number of vehicles that were going through the critical intersections. So, and when we did that, we actually assigned a number of vehicles per residence. When we set up the zones, it tells us how many residences or how many parcels are in that zone, and then we take a best estimate of the number of vehicles. And I just want to emphasize that if you have 3 cars, we're expecting that you're going to evacuate that zone in one. Or, you know, best leave early. And if you think about it, the difference between 1 car and 2 cars coming from every house in a particular zone actually doubles the number of cars trying to exit that area, and conceivably could put people's lives in jeopardy. So I always ask people to, you know, pick a car ahead of time, make sure that one has plenty of gas and your stuff is loaded into it. If you know that it's a red flag day, or we have fire weather emergency that's coming our way, and you're thinking about, well, we have 2 really good cars, you might want to park one someplace away from the house and you know, go to it later. But it's really important that people, when you do evacuate, that you just take 1 car, because we want to minimize the traffic impacts of all those cars leaving in our area. So there's some preparation steps. Is really the first thing to do is know that you're in a zone, and then figure out which one you're in. To understand where your evacuation zone is important, because that will allow you to figure out how many ways out of the zone that you have. And most Lamorinda residents, if you've been here for a while, you know, we have a community that has a whole bunch of cul-de-sacs. It has a whole bunch of areas that are one way in, one way out. So if you live in one of those areas, my suggestion is that if you know it's a red flag day, or you're seeing a big column of smoke and that's drifting over, you know, where you live, is leave early. That's the best advice we can give. And the best part of that scenario is, if you leave early, one is you're out of danger. You've had an opportunity early on to secure your premises, to make sure everything is as in good a shape as you can get it. And then if nothing happens, that I consider that a win. I jokingly tell people, go to the mall, go get some ice cream. I know with COVID-19 that might be a little more difficult, but if you think that at all that there's a threat in the area and you have an opportunity to leave even before there's an evacuation notification of any official consequence, if you just go, you're so much further ahead of the power curve than everybody that waits and thinks they're going to wait until they get an official notification. And sometimes, we do our very best in public safety to make sure that everybody gets information, but sometimes those systems fail. So again, just to emphasize that if you feel like there's danger in the area, take it upon yourself to leave. I oftentimes use the example of spontaneous evacuation. If there was a fire in your house, you wouldn't wait for the fire department or the police department to come knock on your door and say you should leave the house now. You just spontaneously evacuate. So the same thing goes true for any other emergency. If you think there's a threat, by all means, leave the area. So we say this a lot, and it's very important that if you need to be subscribed to as many different ways as you can to get information. And I'm going to spend some time talking about some of those different ways and some things that we're going to do at the Moraga Fire District before fire season to sort of make that a little easier or facilitate more information flow. But there are umpteen million different ways to get information these days. If you have a smartphone or a computer, or most people do, there are tons of ways to do that. So here's a couple of them. One is CAL FIRE has a very robust information program, and for those of you that don't know what CAL FIRE's kind of their jurisdictional areas is, they have primary responsibility for all unimproved lands that are outside of city limits throughout the state. So it's a very large organization. They have a large public information program. They're divided up into units. We are in the Santa Clara Ranger unit, that I think is 5 counties, and including Contra Costa, Alameda, Santa Clara, of course, parts of San Joaquin, and parts of Stanislaus. But their staff is really good about putting out information, as is that they report up to the state office, and that information goes out here too. So the link that will be in the chat that Julie will send out later is this Programs Communications News Releases subscription. And so I went through that today. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to this, send me the CAL FIRE news releases thing. And I filled out my email address and my name. And then I just went down and I clicked on, I want to know everything that CAL FIRE puts out for Contra Costa County. So as fire season approaches and there's information that's pertinent to, where we live here in Contra Costa, I will get those information releases. I've also been part of the public information staff for some large fires around the state with CAL FIRE. But when we had the Tubbs fire and the Kincaid fire, I was part of the PIO staff there. And twice a day, we would send out media releases that, had I subscribed to this for that area, I would have gotten those media releases that were very detailed in terms of, how many residents were evacuated, the size of the fire, the resources assigned, and sort of what the next, what we call the operational period, what was planned for that. So it's a great way to stay abreast of what's going on around the state. And if you have property or interest in other areas around the state, you really can just pretty much click all the boxes and get all the information. I'm not that crazy about it yet, but that the information is certainly available from CAL FIRE. And then the next step in the evacuation kind of preparation is start preparing now. Preparing does make sense, as the slide says. Everybody wants to think that, hey, this will never happen to me. Last summer, I spent 84 days outside of MOFD on fires in other people's areas, that most likely thought, well, this would never happen here. And there were some surprises for people. I dealt with some folks that had lost homes. I dealt with some people that had heavy smoke impacts. We worked with a lot of communities that were kind of impending on what was going to happen. And I think the difference between being prepared and not prepared is bad things can still happen, but if you're expecting or prepared for them, you know, they hopefully they won't be quite as severe as if it's like a big surprise. If you think about how fire seasons have changed over the last, well, since 2013, which was the sort of the first really large fire, which was the Rim fire, which was 263,000 acres plus or minus. And then you look at, you know, that was a career fire, the second career fire for me, the first being the tunnel fire in the Oakland Hills here. But that was the kind of the big career fire. Oh my gosh, I'll never see another fire like this in my entire career. This last summer, I was at a fire up in Humboldt County that was over 1 million acres. So, you know, for whatever reason, fires are larger, quite a bit larger, quite a bit more destructive and faster moving than we've ever seen before. So if I needed to underscore anything right now, I think that being prepared and understanding that, you know, this is nature. The forests are vegetation in California is tending to reset itself. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that we could potentially have a very catastrophic fire any place in California. And, you know, we'll keep working together to make sure that our vegetation is managed as well as we can, and hope that doesn't come to Lamorinda. So down here at the bottom, there's a couple of links. One is www.ready.gov, and that takes you to a page on evacuation. And the other one is readyforwildfire.org. Both those sites have really good information that I hope you'll take a look at and become familiar with. The Ready for Wildfire page has a whole bunch of home evacuation checklists, how to prepare for evacuations, things to do inside and outside of your house. Pretty comprehensive stuff. The ready.gov, again, has a whole bunch of great ideas for preparing for disasters, you know, working with your family and your neighbors to get organized. Some things before evacuations. You know, it's not just wildfires anymore. It could be, you know, a storm. It could be drought. It could be a whole bunch of things. Could be COVID-19. There's lots of things that we're all learning to live in sort of a new era of the world here. And then during evacuation, you know, there's a bunch of tips at ready.gov that you can look at. Great things about being able to communicate with family members that aren't necessarily in the area. There's a number of websites that will help track yourself so that your relatives will know that you're okay. Or if they're not, just a quick anecdote at the Tubbs fire. You know, it was a fast moving fire and people basically had to scatter on very short notice. And at one point, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office was trying to find up to, I think it was 700 and something missing people. And even with a sheriff's office with a fairly good sized staff, you can imagine how much time and how much organizational energy it would take to try and individually investigate and locate 700 missing people. So that whole checking in with your family and every phone call that comes in that says, hey, I don't know where my Uncle Dennis is, you know, that could generate a missing persons report that ties up an investigator for who knows how long. Whereas if I had taken the time to plan and prepare and have a plan for letting my relatives know where I am, that I'm okay, you know, those hours could be spent looking for people that actually really do need help. So there's another tip here that says, figure out how to care for your pets in an emergency now. I think that's a critical part of any evacuation plan. Early on, when I got into emergency management, there were examples that folks gave for hurricanes in the South, where people refused to leave because they couldn't take their pets with them. So the shelter system now is much more accepting of those. We try to plan for large and small animals, but if you need to have a plan for yourself so that in the event that you do evacuate, that you know what and how your pets will be cared for and how that's going to work out. And then after evacuation, as I said earlier, as soon as people are evacuated, everybody wants to know, well, when can I come home and how is that going to work? We break that into a couple of different sections. One is repopulation and one is reentry. So repopulation is if there's a large fire and there's some damage, you know, everybody gets evacuated. There's an evacuation order in place, and then, you know, hopefully not the whole community is destroyed, but there are some areas that are relatively unaffected by the incident. So those areas can be repopulated at some point. The communications lines are back up, the utilities are working, the water system and the sewer system and all those things. So you could actually go back and live in your house. And so that would be kind of signaled by, okay, well, we're repopulating this portion or this zone at this time, at this thing. One thing to think about when you do evacuate, you know, law enforcement's, one of their concerns is going to be to keep people that don't belong there out of that zone. So you need to be able to prove that you do belong there when it's time to go back. So make sure you have some identification that shows your local address so that when it's time to repopulate, you can get back into the zone. And if there is a checkpoint that law enforcement has set up, that you can prove that you actually do belong in there. One of the worst things that could happen is with people evacuated that, you know, looters get in and do some damage while you're away. So law enforcement is very strict, and I've been in several incidents where many arrests were made for people that were trying to either get in and just kind of look around, or maybe were really up to no good. So when you do evacuate, bring something that shows you can get back in, and usually those repopulations are very organized with checkpoints and times, and different streets can go in at different times. So something to keep in mind. And then re-entry is for those areas that actually there was significant damage to. So the utilities may be down, the phone lines, the communication lines may be down. There may be hazards. In some of the more forested areas of the state, I've been on fires, and firefighters on the ground have reported that there's these dead trees that have burned out will actually create stump holes, and the roots will burn out back, you know, be 30-40 feet from the base of the tree. And when those roots burn out, they leave kind of coal pits in there with a very thin crust of soil over the top, so that if a person was walking around through the ash, you could break through those, and suddenly your foot is in a big, you know, basically a barbecue, a big ash pit of very hot coals and things. So every year we injure one or two firefighters that I know of that are doing mop-up operations in a forest area, and they step into one of those ash pits. And some other hazards that are there is, you know, fire weakened trees. I've seen huge trees fall over, didn't make a sound, and suddenly they're crashing on the ground. So if there's a significant incident, that's another hazard that we need to be aware of. And another reason that fire officials working with law enforcement might say, you know, this area is not ready for re-entry yet. And then if you think of some of the images from the Tubbs fire or Kincaid fire or any of the major fires around the state, the impact that fire has on utility, there's always wires down, and it's kind of this spaghetti mess of burned wire that's laying in the streets. All that needs to be cleaned up. The hazard treats need to be, you know, dealt with. Utilities need to be restored. I spent some time talking with some folks about, you know, why they couldn't go back into their homes, and you know, our reasoning at the fire side was that, nothing is working right now. So you have no communications. We would be putting you back into a very hazardous area with, if something happened, you would have no way to call for help. And so generally the rule on reentry is we try and get everything as safe and secured as possible. If there are damages to structures, we'll escort people back so they can see what's been damaged on their property, and then hopefully they'll come back out with us and plan for a more orderly kind of damage inspection with their insurance companies. Another thing about kind of reentry is that if your power's been out for any length of time at all, and I can't quote right now off the top of my head what the county health officer says, but it's a relatively short time. It's like 5 hours if temperature is above a certain degrees, is that food that's been stored, once it gets above that temperature is considered unsafe to eat. So been on other incidents where we have absolutely filled many dumpsters with spoiled food for people that have been evacuated from their homes for several days. So something else to think about, that if you're going back in a kind of reentry or even a repopulation, if you've been away for some time and the power's been out, which most likely it will be in a fire scenario, you might want to bring some fresh food with you too to get back home. So other sources of things that are important. This is one of the best publications I think has been done, thanks to Duncan and Lamorinda CERT. This is our Lamorinda Residents Guide to Wildfire Preparedness and Evacuation. If you don't have a copy of this, Julie, I don't have a link for this, but I should. Okay, great. This is a super good kind of everything that you should know about wildfire preparedness and evacuation. Please take a minute and go on the internet, download your own copy, and print out a couple, share them with your neighbors. It's a great way to prepare as we come up to the 2021 fire season. And then this is a project that I've been working on with our admin staff. And right now it's conceptual, but it's the idea of the Moraga Fire District Fire Weather Information page that's coming up. We're going to put this on our website and kind of create a one-stop shop for all the things that you'd want to know about fire weather and what's going on fire-wise in Lamorinda. So we're going to put the fire weather forecast or fire danger today sign status in our community, our hourly weather observations, fire weather camera locations and live links, our Bay Area Air Quality Management District, the burn day status. I don't know if you heard about Purple Air, but Purple Air is a system that's kind of a crowdsourcing that monitors air quality for Lamorinda, links to fire information, and also some social media things. So just to quickly go through those, twice a day, the National Weather Service issues a fire weather forecast. And this particular one is for our zone CAZ 510, which is the East Bay, and it covers Lamorinda. So this was today's at 7:30 a.m. When fire season gets here, they do another one, I think around 2 o'clock every day. So you can check in and see if there was going to be a red flag warning or a fire weather watch. It would be listed up here in the header portion of the fire weather in this discussion area. And then you can actually see what the predicted winds and humidities and max min temperatures are. So this is something that we use in the fire service, but I think it's got great applications for, residents that want to stay up on, what's going on in my area and what can I look forward to. It also has this little part at the bottom here that talks about the extended forecast. This one goes to Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So you get a little glimpse of what's ahead. And then I mentioned earlier about the fire danger today signs in the district. So this last year, I've got a group of, I think there's about 10 folks that are community residents, and the district has these fire danger signs that are up, and it's really, there's some choices. It's either low, medium, high, very high, or extreme. And so a green dot here is low, thank goodness. And over here it lists by the locations. So one's at Bevmo, there's one at the Canyon Post Office, one at the bottom of El Toinel, at the top of Lomas Cantadas, and so on. Most of several are in front of our fire stations. You can come to this page and see what the posting is. If the red flag is up, it'll be displayed up here on this little I don't know, graph thing. So it's kind of a neat way to see what's going on, and quickly glancing at the district, what the fire danger is expected to be for that day. And then the next thing that's going to go on our page is there's probably 10 or 12 weather stations that are National Weather Service fire danger rating or very close to that qualified. So we'll have not only the hourly readings for each of those weather stations around the district, but probably we'll have like Mount Diablo, so you can see what the winds are aloft, and some of the ones that are in our community, as well as the kind of the graphical description of those. And this is the Briones Regional Park. This station is up at Briones Peak, just outside the district, but you can see it goes through all of the weather parameters that are going on. So again, another way to stay apprised of what's going on weather-wise around you. And then another link on that site, which hopefully will be up well before fire season, but hopefully not in the not too distant future, are the alert wildfire cameras. If you haven't seen these, there's a link that I'll have Julie send out, but we have cameras on peaks around the district. So there's one at Briones, there's two actually up on Volmer Peak and Tilden Park up here, one on Round Top, which is just kind of south of Highway 24, kind of looks down at Moraga. There's one in kind of downtown, or well, just above the Moraga Shopping Center on Alta Mesa. One in Lafayette that kind of looks back Highway 24 on Dunshire Drive. And then we're working with our partners at East Bay Mud and Lafayette Police Department to install a camera at Mulholland, which is up at the top of Donald Drive, which if you look at this, it really will kind of close the loop on us being able to, not only from the fire agencies, but from residents' perspective, kind of look around the district. For the fire agencies, we're using these to watch fire development, or if a call comes in, the dispatch centers can actually pan, tilt, and zoom these cameras to kind of zoom in on to see if there really is a fire, or if the fire growth is such that, you know, the dispatcher can make a call as far as, you know, augmenting the initial response to an incident in and around the district. And not only can our MOFD and Contra Costa County fire dispatchers look at these cameras, but also our CAL FIRE partners can also take a look at them. So it's quite an interesting tool. If you haven't seen this video, this is the 2020, this last summer, Irving Drive fire in Moraga. And this is a time lapse of that. I'll just play it real quick. So this was a fire that started in an afternoon. It was an accidental start from someone that was trying to do the right thing, I think. But we were able to capture this from Volmer Peak, way over in the Berkeley Hills, and build a time lapse of fire progression. As the fire was burning, not only could I see it, and I wasn't at the scene, but the dispatchers could see it, not only at ConFire, but at CAL FIRE. And it helped, and in East Bay Regional Parks, and it helped to coordinate the response to that. So it's quite an interesting tool, and if you get a chance, hopefully you can take a look at the Alert Wildfire website. And again, we'll have a link to those images on the MOFD website before fire season starts this year. See if I can get out of that. And then another piece of information that I think is important for the public to know is our open burn notification status with the Air Quality Management District here in the Bay Area. The district is divided into 3 zones. We're over here in this east zone, and to know whether today is a burn day or not a burn day is great information for residents to know. We get a lot of calls about, hey, I smell smoke. Well, it could be a burn day, and there could be a prescribed fire or something else going on. So this is a great site just to know what the kind of a little view into what the air quality is for that day. And then that leads me to this Purple Air. This is their page. We'll have a link to this up there where you can see what their air quality rating is through Purple Air. And so here's the little scale down here in the lower left-hand corner where you can see green is, 0, and it gives little recommendations. The yellow is 50, orange is getting to higher particulate matter, and 150, it's kind of self-explanatory. So this will be an interesting link to kind of follow as we go through the summer. And then sort of the last sort of cleanup piece for that situational awareness is, again, as I said at the beginning of my little presentation here, is it's really hard not to get information these days. So this is just a collection of both Twitter feeds and websites and tools like Nixle to keep people, everybody informed. And when something happens in Lamorinda, people are very quick to jump on sort of unofficial social media. And what I would suggest is look to some of the official links, Contra Costa County Fire, MOFD, any of the cities, towns, or counties. We take great pains to try and make sure we get the right information out at the right time, as quickly as possible, as soon as we can verify it, and to make sure that it's not rumor, that it's really important stuff. And at MOFD, we're working very hard to make sure that when we're doing anything that impacts large numbers of people, that we get it out not only on our webpage, but through social media. And principally for us, that's Facebook and our Facebook links to Twitter. So important stuff. If you needed to get a link, you could probably, I'm trying to set it up so that you can go to this page and click on a link to go directly to any one of these Twitter feeds or Facebook pages and get the information that you need. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and turn it back over to Duncan to see if there's any questions that we want to entertain. I haven't been watching the chat, but let's kind of see where we go from here.
Thank you, Dennis. Before we get into questions, I have a few things to add to this. For information, besides the Zonehaven app, which is excellent information, Lafayette, the city of Lafayette, last fall put together or implemented a traveler's information station. It's an AM radio station, very low power. The transmitter is at the Lafayette Police Department. So most of Lafayette, much of Moraga, and I would guess probably most of Orinda can hear it. It's at 1670, that's 1670 AM. It's on 24 hours a day, and it has just general information on it right now, but during an evacuation of any of the Lamorinda jurisdictions, there would be specific information for the evacuation broadcast on that. Again, it's 1670 AM, so you can get it on your car radio. Dennis mentioned temperatures for food. The recommendation from USDA is if it's above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 2 hours, throw it out. If it's above 90 degrees, but below 140 for 1 hour, throw it out. So if it's a hot food, keep it above 140. If it's a cold food, keep it below 40. So 40 to 140. Jeff talked about vents, and we used to have the standard vent was a 1/4-inch mesh. 1/4-inch mesh doesn't keep out fire embers very well. So it's, in the last several years, people have gone to 1/8-inch mesh. 1/8 inch is good, but there are a couple of kinds of vents that are even better. One is an ember blocking vent where the embers really can't get in there. Unfortunately, the air can't get in quite as well either. So there are some calculations you have to make and probably add some additional vents if you go this route. Another style of vent that is good, but also doesn't allow quite as much air in, is something called an intumescent vent. Intumescent is a property of a material that swells with heat. Typically at 300 degrees, an intumescent material will swell up to 50 to 100 times its thickness. So the vents, intumescent vents, are actually coated with a material that when a fire ember comes in and hits it, the coating will swell shut and the whole vent will close down. It is a one-time operation. So if you have an intumescent material, once it swells, it doesn't go back, but it does an excellent job. Also available are intumescent paints. If you're painting your exterior of your house, you can look into intumescent paints. They will swell up when embers hit them. They'll create a char surface which will not burn. Eventually it will burn, but it will reduce the possibility of the underlying material, wood or whatever, from burning. So they'll buy you probably at least half an hour, maybe an hour of time before the underlying surface will burn. Another material that I have recently used, if you have a wooden deck that comes up to your house, wooden decks and the corner of the deck to your outside wall is a perfect place for pine needles and so forth to accumulate. It's very hard to keep those clean all the time, and embers like to find those corners between the deck and the wall, the outside siding of the house. By putting a fire retardant coating on the deck, you can actually get something that will not burn for quite a while, like at least half an hour. I have a redwood deck with a fire retardant coating that goes on the newly finished or the newly installed redwood or fully sanded deck. You put on the fire retardant coating and then you put on a water-based urethane finish, and the deck is, you wouldn't know that there's anything different about it. You can also use a colored paint. If you have a deck with paint on it, you can use an intumescent paint on your deck. So that's all I have. Are there any questions? We have some in the chat.
Hey, Duncan, I was looking at some of the notes in the chat, and one of the ones that I pulled out was, whoops, it just moved, from Joan R. to the panelists. And she said, a concern is that we are unsure of what direction to evacuate. So if I could just address that.
Yes.
It will be very difficult for anyone to tell you right now that on this day at this time, this is how you should evacuate. I have two suggestions. This one is you know your area much better than I do, or a police officer does. Explore those routes. Figure out if there's only one way to evacuate. The safest thing is like I said earlier, go really early. Don't wait to be told. If there's smoke in the air, you know, go someplace that's safe for a while until you feel that it's safe to go home. If you have multiple routes, you know, the only thing better than having two ways out of an area is having 3 or 4 or 5. Know what those are and communicate those with your family so that everybody knows that, okay, here's how we're going to go on, and you know, and if that one's blocked, we're going to go this way. And at the end of that, at the end of that journey, we're all going to meet and have 2 or 3 places. It could be, IKEA in Emeryville, or it could be, Sun Valley Mall, or, you pick the places and know where you're going to go and where your family's going to reunite. But there is no one-stop shop every time you're going to be able to go this way, because just about the time someone tells you that's how you're going to do it every time, that's not going to work, and then you're going to be in trouble. So redundancy is a great thing, especially in terms of emergency management. The more systems that are in place to allow you to have alternatives, the better off we're all going to be.
Thank you, Dennis. There's a question here from R. Is there any plan for CERT to bulk purchase ember-proof vents for purchase by residents? We've looked into it. We actually have an agreement to bulk purchase vents. The challenge is that there are several different styles of vents, several different sizes. We have samples available. Anyone can come and take a look at them by appointment, and we can set you up with a purchase so that you can order them through us, and we get a discount that we can pass on to you. But we will not be stocking them because there are too many sizes, too many styles available, whether they're foundation vents, soffit vents, gable vents, roof vents. There's just too many for us to stock. Another question is rodent proofers are still using 1/4 inch. How do contractors and handy people get the information that's no longer acceptable? Feel free to email me at manager@lamorinda.cert.org and I will respond. I'm currently working on putting information up on our website, but until it's there, feel free to email and I'll get back to you with all the information.
Oh, Duncan, I'm looking. Yeah. Is that you, Jeff? Nope. Duncan, I'm looking at Victoria's question about what's the status of L20L to Wildcat as a route for viable evacuation routes. What I would say to that is Chief Cook and Chief Winnacker and the Orinda staff, city staff are still working on that. It would be probably the best thing would be to check with Chief Cook, and when Chief Winnacker is back in the area, I will ask him for an update on that and get that information to Duncan. And then there's another question from Linda about does MOFD have a list of refuge areas like school fields and parking lots? I'm gonna kind of answer that the same way I did about having multiple routes for evacuating. We don't have a list. If you live in an area that has a large school field or a golf course or a large, relatively fire safe area, we're not likely to direct you to that unless it's a dire emergency, but you're certainly, if you don't leave early, that might be your only alternative. I urge everyone to know where those areas are. Know that they're there, but please, the most efficient thing, if you think about the limited resources we have in both law enforcement and fire resources during a major emergency, the most efficient thing is for residents, everyone in the area, to just leave, go far safely away, let first responders do their job, try and protect your property as best we can. If you're there, we're going to have to assign resources to protecting life before property. So it's important, if you can leave, to leave and leave early. And those other areas hopefully are there as kind of a last ditch thing. But again, last ditch is always much more of an emergency than had you left an hour before the evacuation warning came.
Thank you, Dennis. Another question that always comes up is what routes should we take, and why don't we publish the temporary refuge areas and the shelters beforehand? And that's because we don't know where the fire or the earthquake or whatever the disaster is, we don't know where it's going to be. And if we have a wildfire coming in and we have to have one road open for emergency vehicles to come in to fight the fire, we want the residents to evacuate on another road. We don't want all the traffic intersecting with the first responders. So, but we don't know where that's going to be, and we don't know which way the wind's blowing, so where the smoke is, where the fire is going. So everything is fluid. So you will be notified in the community warning system message of which way to evacuate, which routes to use. But that's not something that can be predetermined because we don't know where the fire will be and we don't know where the wind is blowing. A question from Patty is, can a summary of these recommendations be sent to participants?
Yeah, I can answer that, Duncan. I'm going to send a follow-up email to everybody with links from this this presentation, and you'll be able to find everything that we've talked about through those links. And you can always contact us as well.
We will also put them on the LamorindaCERT.org website. As soon as Julie gets those links together, we will put them up as a document on the first page. Down at the bottom of the first page, there are, it's a blog that scrolls, so you can get various items there. A lot of it is old, but we will get this as a new one, so it will be the first thing to come up on the homepage when you open it up.
And we're also recording this, so the recording will be up on our website in a couple days, I believe.
Yes, it takes about 2 days for me to get it up there.
Hey, Duncan, this is Jeff. There's a question I'd like to take a minute and answer real quick. It's about creek beds in the communities and being fire safe. The creek beds fall under the jurisdiction of California Fish and Wildlife. There are certain types of vegetation that can be removed, but the landowner has to file for a permit and have a biologist come out and inspect the area. So any stream beds, the banks, or within the actual stream channel, our recommendation is to contact Fish and Wildlife before you do any work in there. If you do work without a permit, Fish and Wildlife has the ability to levy some pretty heavy fines in most of those areas because they retain the moisture and the fuels have a high moisture content. They're not as dangerous and they don't support rapid fire growth as fuels do in other areas of the community. But just to answer that question, you can contact me directly. I have good contact with a biologist for Fish and Wildlife I can put you in contact with.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, Duncan, I just wanted to kind of close out by saying, you know, the fire district and the police departments here in Lamorinda, Contra Costa County Fire and CAL FIRE, you know, we all work very closely together. We try and get sort of the synergistic effect from all the agencies, as well as the large landowners like East Bay Mud and East Bay Regional Parks. But at the end of the day, my closing comment would be, we are all, the agencies, the first responders, the residents, the city governments, we're all in this mess together. It's not something that happened overnight, and it's not something that's going to go away overnight. So, you know, there's enforcement, and then there's voluntary compliance. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to make Lamorinda safer and a better place to live. So I appreciate everybody's time tonight. There was like 80 people on the call, so there's certainly interest in the topic. And I just want to thank Lamorinda CERT for hosting us tonight, and I hope that we all get all of our work, as much work as possible, done between now and when things start to dry out, which if you think about it, it's not too far away. So again, thank you, Lamorinda, CERT, Duncan, Julie, and everybody that attended the call tonight.
Thank you, Dennis. One last, probably last comment. A question from Deborah saying tech is great when it is working, but during the high wind events, PG&E tends to do a PSPS, or the wind itself blows transformers, so forth. During the fire in Lafayette in the fall of 2019 that burned down the tennis club, she had no cell or internet service. That's one of the reasons why Lafayette put in the 1670 AM Travelers Information Station. That's on the road. You can always get that in your car or on a portable radio, and that will have information that you should have in an evacuation situation. With that, unless I see any other questions, we have 13 new messages down here.
Duncan, there's some questions about the products that you were talking about. Maybe I'll talk to you and I'll add that into the email with the vents and the paints. I'll add that into the follow-up email.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you all for coming.